Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Glowed Up and Woke. Today's video is about Orc Or Theory of Consciousness. I'll be presenting what I know about it and basically summarizing all the research I've done on it. And also, I want to dedicate this video to all the scientists and the theories that are coming out in the past decade or so. And right now, there's a lot of cutting-edge scientific theories which are bridging the gap between our understanding of spirituality and science and creating a feasible model or presenting a feasible model, biological basis, empirically measurable mechanism to explain how certain spiritual concepts can actually work, how energy healing is actually a real scientifically testable thing. So I'm going to start out by naming some of my favorites. Rupert Sheldrake might be at the top of my list. He's definitely top three. Dr. Rupert Sheldrake is the theorist or the scientist who's proposing and expanding, developing, and presenting morphogenetic field theory, of which I have a video. I recommend if you want to check that out. It's one of my earlier videos that I've done. So that's Rupert Sheldrake. Another one is Dr. Bruce Lipton, who has the book called The Biology of Belief, and he explains how the cell membrane has such a huge role in what sort of information, genetic information, is expressed and how cells in your body transmit and transceive information, very much like an antenna. And today we're talking about Stewart Hameroff and Roger Penrose, who are the creators or the originators of the Orc Or Theory of Consciousness. Now, Orc Or Theory of Consciousness is the first, maybe it's not the very first, but it's definitely the first one that has picked up momentum. First theory of consciousness that's picked up momentum, which states that consciousness is not generated by the brain by the complex computations in our neurons, but rather it is existing and pervasive in all of the universe, all of nature, all of the material existence. It's actually founded upon consciousness, or what they refer to as proto-consciousness. Proto-consciousness is very similar, almost identical to the Vedic concept of pure, undifferentiated consciousness, from which all manifestation emerges. Now, if you're familiar with the Vedic teachings, there's a lot of very fascinating things as you read Orc Or Theory of Consciousness, which are drawing parallels between the Vedic understanding of how creation manifests and how consciousness and the role of consciousness in reality, and basically the physics of consciousness. So I'll go into explaining Orc Or Theory now. Orc Or Theory stands for Orchestrated Objective Reduction. So in this theory of consciousness, quantum computing by the microtubules of the brain is orchestrating the way that we reduce the objective realities that are possible, that are in a state of potential in a quantum field. So I'll say that again. Orc Or Theory, orchestrated objective reduction, refers to the mechanism in the brain which orchestrates the reduction or the collapse of multiple possibilities into one objective reality. So the microtubules, according to Orc Or Theory, the microtubules in the brain are capable of not only quantum computing, but also capable of vibrating and tuning into extremely high rates of frequency, of hertz. So it goes all the way down to the gigahertz, which is the level of hertz is super, so there's hertz, kilohertz, megahertz, gigahertz are like super, super tiny. And we actually find this resonance in the water inside of the microtubules. And we also find it in the Planck scale geometry of space-time. So according to the Orc Or Theory of consciousness, consciousness is actually being picked up by the brain rather than being generated by the brain, which is a very Vedic concept. And it allows us to conceive of a world where we are all connected by an ocean of consciousness. And all the shapes and forms, the physical reality that we see in this world is merely waves upon the surface of the ocean of consciousness, which emerge from consciousness and then eventually always return back to consciousness. And this consciousness interconnects and interrelates all living things, so that we're all sharing the same ocean. We're all waves of the same ocean. So back to the orchestration of objective reduction. A quantum field, when we as an observer, one of the main concepts of quantum physics that has made it into mainstream is that the observer collapses the wave of possibilities into one single particle, right? So there's this particle-wave duality. If you're not familiar with the wavical duality, then that's something you might want to check that out. Maybe I'll make a video about that, but there's already a lot of information about that. The double slit experiment shows how when the particles are being shot, the photons are being shot through a screen or a slit, a metal slit, and then onto a canvas behind it, they behave both as waves or as particles. Depending on the observer, depending on who's observing the photons of light, they will behave differently. So when they're in a state of wave, a wave state is not one centralized particle location objective reality. It's a field of potential realities, or like a tree with many branches on it. All these different routes can be taken, and the one that gets taken, the route that actually manifests, is the one that the observer collapses those possible realities into one. So the observer is literally affecting every physical phenomena that we observe. We are affecting just by our observation at a quantum level. You cannot observe something without influencing it, without determining certain aspects of it. So how does the brain do this? Well, using the microtubules in the brain contain water, and the water inside the microtubules is vibrating at the gigahertz level, which is the same as the proto-consciousness or the pure consciousness, which is residing in the matrix of the space-time geometry. And they can actually measure that. It creates a sound. You can measure in outer space at the Planck scale level. And it needs to increase through several orders of magnitude in order to get to the gigahertz, the level of our biology, where we can pick it up like an antenna. Once we're able to receive it, then the orchestration needs to take place, because it's at a Planck scale, it's at a quantum level, which means it's a quantum field of possibilities. It hasn't been reduced or collapsed into one possibility. So the example that we use when we talk about superposition or quantum possibilities is Schrödinger's cat. And the experiment is that you have a cat in a box. Nobody can see inside the box. And with the cat, there's some uranium. The uranium may or may not decay at any moment. It's highly random. So if anyone looks in the box and sees a dead cat, whether you see a dead cat or a live cat, you basically killed. If you see a dead cat when you open the box, you basically kill the cat, because we have no ability to predict whether or not the uranium decays. So therefore, the cat is in a state of superposition. Before anyone observes the state of the cat is both alive and dead, right? Because the probabilities are like equal, and it's in a quantum state. So upon opening the box and observing the cat, you either have saved the cat's life or killed the cat. So it can happen like a more other examples, it's like, um, if when you have a belief about something as the observer, and you're observing that of something, and you have a bias, a belief that a certain outcome is more likely to happen, then that outcome is more likely to happen when you're observing than when someone else is observing. So it's very difficult to think of practical examples in the physical level of magnitude because we're talking about quantum events. Quantum events are particles. All particles exist in a state of quantum superposition. And that's where the orchestrated objective reduction comes in. This theory says that the microtubules are able to use quantum computer in order to collapse the wave. So if the particles that make up the world that we're perceiving are existing in a state of quantum superposition, that means that one atom is existing in many different places and traveling at different speeds with different spin ratios all at the same time. It's not several atoms, it's one atom in many different places, or one electron, or a subatomic particle. And therefore, as the observer, something about our consciousness, and this is not Orc Or Theory, but somehow when it is Orc Or Theory, when our consciousness, when our personalized consciousness interacts with the proto-consciousness of the quantum field, which makes up the space-time geometry of the universe, we reduce the amount of superposition possibilities. We reduce them all the way to just one objective reality. And I think that's about as good as I can present it right now. I do have more material. I've written an article about it, and perhaps I'll come back and answer questions or read the article that I wrote. But if you have any questions, I would be more than happy to answer them. And it's a pleasure to bring this information to you. I hope you are feeling blessed and joyful today. Much love. See you again soon. Sana.